welcome to Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. I am your host, Diane Lozo, also known as Lucy Smiles. If you're new to the show, we take time every week to sit down with those in the world, all over the world, who have really taken a part of their life and said, you know what, this is no longer negotiable for me. I am going to follow the light. I am going to follow the magic that ignites my inner essence. And typically, as you know, when you see people shining their light, there's a story behind that. And so I had felt for years that I wanted to be able to share people's stories behind the scenes of how did they get to where they are? Why are they doing what they're doing? What was the adversity, perhaps, or the trauma, perhaps, or just the energetic ability for them to see life in a different way. And so today I am so blessed and so grateful. And I'm actually super excited because I have Constance Armstrong in the living room today. How are you?
I am so great. So glad to be here.
I am so glad for you to be here. And I will tell you first, let me tell you a little bit about Constance before we get in. And then I'm going to share a little bit about how I know you and how much you have shifted and evolved and just blown up in terms of your own bright light since meeting you a few short years ago. So Constance Armstrong is a licensed nurse and healthcare entrepreneur. She is a CEO of Align Medical Concierge, which is based in LA and Los Angeles, and also the director of nursing operations for a medtech startup, which is called Direct Meds, serving the US and Canada markets. And she is certified with Reiki. She's a certified Reiki practitioner. She is a past life regression hypnotherapist. So she has her certification in that. I love that. Can't wait to tap into that. And also a psychedelic assisted therapy facilitator. Wow. And also amongst that, because that's not enough, she's also currently working on an album around ecstatic dance and also chakra activations that was incorporated concepts from her somatic healing. I've heard a lot about somatic healing over the last several years, and which is the work that she has done while she was recovering from her diagnosis 2.5 years ago with stage 4 cancer. And so welcome, Constance, to the living room. I'm so excited.
I'm so glad to be here. So flattered that you've asked me to come and share time with you.
Oh my goodness, I'm telling you. So before we get started, Constance, and I met you a few years back. I think it could have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
That sounds right.
And your work ethic is stellar. I know that from working with you and partnering with you in some, wellness projects, but also knowing the work that you were doing when I first was introduced to you. And so why don't we start off there? So when I met you 4 or 5 years ago, ballpark, you were working as a super full-time in nursing. And then this, I think, through us building a friendship, COVID hit, so the pandemic hit, and then you were still even more laser focused on, your brand actually called like the Set Nurse. I think it was, if you can correct me.
Yeah. So Align is a DBA of the Set Nurse.
Okay.
It's an extension.
Right. And so maybe we'll start right from the beginning of being a nurse. Like, what called you to be that? And then I do want to tap into how things just started to continually shift.
That's actually really interesting that you're bringing that up because when I first started, I wasn't that girl who wanted to be a nurse my whole life, although I've always wanted to help people. So it wasn't a really good natural fit. But I will say when my daughter was about 5, and she's 19 now, but she's about 5, we would go to the library all the time. And I always was interested in metaphysical books. It's kind of the only thing that I would ever pick up in a library. So I found a very thin, tiny book that was probably about 120, 150 pages about how to do past life regression hypnotherapy on yourself. So this was before I got certified. I found this little book in the tiny little one shelf section of like metaphysical books. And so I got that and I actually started utilizing it. I had just gone through a breakup. I was going through a rough time. And I started doing all these deep meditations in that space of time. That was 2011, I believe. Okay. So in that space of time, I did a lot of meditations. I was running a business at that time. I started having all these downloads when I would do my meditations about theta wave. And by the way, of course, this is kind of way back. So it wasn't one of those things where everything you possibly wanted to know was going to be on the internet. So I got this idea in my head, this word popped into my head, theta wave, and I didn't really actually know what it was. And so I looked it up, and then I realized, oh, I need to start doing these meditations. So it was weird. It was like I was already having these downloads at that time, and I had already started on somewhat of a spiritual journey at that time, but I also was dealing with a lot of like personal baggage. So it was kind of it was a good start. Anyway, I started having very strong impressions that I had to start going to nursing school, which was like had not been on my mind at all. And within a couple months, I enrolled in nursing school. But I was also concurrently doing all these Merkaba meditations around my business so that I could grow my business. And I learned all these, like, very organically kind of adopted these principles and techniques around working my business, because being a single mom, I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to generate business. So, like, how do I do that? And I would meditate on specific amounts of clients or specific amounts of dollar amounts. And I do totally different meditations now because I want to align more with my inner purpose. But it was kind of like I was tapping into this something that I wasn't really aware of. So yeah, when I started nursing, it was all around the same time where I had started doing my own past life regression. I was doing all these meditations about essentially abundance. But it was happening very organically. So that's actually how I started nursing. And that was, I enrolled in 2011 and I completed in 2013.
Oh,
So
wow.
also interestingly, that's like Mayan calendar. This is when I talked to a lot of people who started on some sort of like a very specific trajectory. It was around 2012. And in that time, when I actually was in the third semester of my nursing, I also went to Sedona and I learned how to do past life regression hypnotherapy with a gentleman by the name of Dick Sutphin, who was a contemporary of Dolores Cannon. They had
Oh,
different techniques, but they knew each
right.
other really well, right?
Yeah.
They're around the same age. Dick was an older guy, and they were actively doing hypnotherapy in the 60s, and then it started turning into past life regression. And he actually had he wrote several books, and one of them was on parallel lives, which of course in the 70s people were not talking about this, but he was talking about it.
Yeah.
So I had a very and as soon as I actually ended up doing those type of hypnotherapy sessions, I didn't know what Dolores Cannon was. I wasn't familiar with her at that time,
Yeah.
particularly, maybe in passing, but I hadn't read any of her books or any of her work. But I actually started doing sessions that I would go into a session with a client, and then we would immediately go into like the life between lives, renegotiating Akashic record contracts. It just like was a natural extension of what we were doing in a past life. It made sense to me. It's like, okay, so now we're in this past life space and this past life is coming up. Like, let's renegotiate contracts and see what we can resolve and embrace. And we pull in people's spirit guides. And it was just happening very organically. So that was
Wow.
all happening while I was going to nursing school, 12 years ago.
And when this was all happening, because some people could say like, wow, far out.
Yeah, right.
But when this was all happening, I'm a couple of things I'm thinking is like, did you already have an openness to this? Because
Well, yeah, so I had even when I was I lived in New York City when I moved there when I was 17 to go to acting school, which I don't do any of that now, but that's what I was doing then. And um I dated somebody who's now a very famous shaman that has like 500,000 followers. I mean, I was very unaware. I was not intentionally moving towards that. I grew up very religious. I left that religion when I was about 16 or 17, right before I moved to New York. I was like, I don't believe this. I'm not going to do this anymore. But I had a really like very fundamental, like we read scriptures every day. I went to, like, we prayed every day. I don't think it was, some of it was very restrictive. Obviously, that's the nature of religion. But I also got weirdly a very good, like some context for spiritual concepts. And so
Right.
I wasn't going in cold. So I think the fact that I already had that kind of a background lent itself to me having some interest there, because I didn't totally
Mhm.
drop it. I just was not going about it from a religious standpoint.
Yeah.
So I did attract people. People would come up to me on the street all the time and be like, I had a dream about you. We were in a past life together. This was happening to me when I was like 17, 18 years old. So it was
Wow.
honestly like kind of all the time.
Right.
But a lot of times I was like, I have to pay bills. I've got a life. I don't have time for this.
That's so
So,
interesting.
but yeah, so I did date this shaman who ended up being like Gwyneth Paltrow's shaman, and we dated when I was 18 and he was
Wow.
22. He just married the Princess of Norway. You can look that up.
Oh my
That's
God. Wow.
well, one of the princesses. But anyway, that's a whole story in and of itself.
That's
But
yeah.
yeah, weirdly, I did have, and I had been working with another, like a relationship specialist, but she also does a lot of spiritual clearing work. And I started working with her probably in 2010. Her
Right.
name's Audrey Hope. She's located in Los Angeles and does a lot of really amazing work, which I would say probably is like some sort of like Akashic record type of work. Everyone's got
Mhm.
different ways that they talk about what they're doing.
Yes.
Because I think people come in with different gifts and different keys. We all have them. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of developing those types, like what resonates with you.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was something I've always had at least a toe in, if not quite a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's a wonderful that you say what you had to what did you talk about, like, you were in this religious, the construct of religion, whatever that means, and again, um, this is a no judgment zone.
for sure.
So what worked for you started to, like, you transitioned into but what I wanna share is, as I was hearing you say that, I have heard that so more often than not,
Mhm,
where what happens is with this specific ability to show what it means to be open to something bigger than ourselves. Right. So a lot of times, I follow like Aaron Abke and other people who are doing such amazing things on this earth. They
mhm,
may have started from that background. So that background lent itself to this context of opening up to something bigger than just our 3D reality. And it allows us to have that invitation, if you will,
mhm,
to look beyond the realm that is, right? And then we can sift and sort and say, okay, like this is really working for me, or this invitation was such a blessing, and now I need to move on to something that's calling my alignment with my heart. And that's where I'm feeling as you're sharing your story, is it seems like every single thing is on purpose, right? And
mhm,
so how you're moving through your purpose, it makes sense to hear you say that you decided that that was the invitation, grateful for that, and then you were starting to follow. Where else are you now being led, right? And so it's really beautiful to know that, and it's going to be different for other people, right? It's
right.
finding what's meant for us on this path where we are here. I want to touch on, I don't want to go too far ahead, but I almost want to veer it to this conversation. When you were speaking around your learning more about sacred contracts, I totally I'm aligned with that philosophy and have been for some time. Having said that, when you were talking about, I want to maybe bring in, if you're okay with it right now, is like the diagnosis of your stage 4 cancer.
Absolutely.
I followed you as a friend, we would stay in touch, and then I had seen this part of your life and I was like, wow. And so can you maybe, is there a way that you can marry that into sacred contracts? Because if everything is
Yeah.
on purpose, how did that fit into your life? And maybe what did that look like for you?
It was interesting because even a year before I got diagnosed, I had talked to my best friend because there was something going on with my thyroid and I needed radiation on my thyroid. But I had a scan and I was a little bit concerned. And I told her, I've got this family history of cancer on my mom's side, which I didn't end up having this type of cancer. But we talked about it at length. And then almost exactly a year later, I ended up having this diagnosis, which really to me was out of nowhere. And because it was such a fast growing cancer that it was full blown by the time we found it, it had already metastasized through almost my entire body. It was coming up from my knee all the way up, and it was already in both lungs. And this particular cancer, like many of the fast growing cancers, was the doctor thought it was like trying to get up to my brain. And so very disconcerting that it was already basically right here. And so I think that in that diagnosis, there's a couple things that I really have gotten some sort of clarity on. It's all a little bit gray because as you sort through things and more is revealed, you get so much more information. And I certainly don't want to make assumptions, but I do think I had a possible exit point because it was a very narrow margin of being very ill, and my body was already failing. And so, I mean, they immediately put me into hospice care because the odds weren't great that I was going to do well. And so I do think I had a potential exit point if I wanted to take it. I had a lot of unresolved trauma around childhood issues. I had a lot of pain that I was carrying around that I had a really hard time taking the time that I really needed to get into my body and heal, because some of it just is integration work and it takes time. It's not like you go to a retreat for a weekend and then I don't care how much ayahuasca you do, you still have to take that time to like bring the learning into your body. And that takes some peace and quiet, and an ability to like be gentle with yourself, because even if you're not ill, our bodies and our minds are fragile in those points where we start to reintegrate new information into our body systems. And so I do think I had a potential exit point had I wanted to take it. I just was not wanting to take it. And I think that at that point I have over the process of about, a year and a half, as I actually was getting physically better and more cognizant of what was going on in terms of like how I needed to operate to be able to live healthy. I realized that I was having to like renegotiate how I wanted to do life, what I wanted my life to look like. It was almost like in that choice, I got an entirely new, it was a completely empty box it was a gift, like a total void, but it had every possibility in it, contained within it, Yeah. So I took a lot of like intentional tools like journaling and meditation, just basics, and started to rebuild my life. And kind of, I had to find some anchors that allowed me, even when my body wasn't feeling good, to continue moving with some steps forward every single day. Because if I didn't do that, I was going to backslide, and that was going to end in my life being like likely ending. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I'm enthralled by this. And as you're sharing, there's so many thoughts and feelings that are coming through me is what I'm feeling and seeing with you is that the amount of energy and time and dedication and loyalty and drive that you gave to the practice, because like of being like an RA, like a registered nurse, and also being on the set through COVID, right? All of that you were giving out and out and out without building that relationship with yourself. And I loved when you said I had to have a renegotiation. I can picture you like renegotiating with yourself. Like, what are we going to do here? What are we actually going to commit to? And it was almost like that 11th hour where you had to either you're in or you're out, right? And so it was beautiful how you said that. Like, I was not ready, because I've been connected to you through the before, then the in and the after, like very lightly. However, when I see and I can feel your energy from that, I could sense this like aura of just like self-love and self-nurturing that you have, that I know you're still then gifting your gift to other people, but in a different way where you're not emptying your cup and then trying to pour from an empty cup. So
that's exactly right.
Right. So it's a beautiful picture that I've painted while I'm listening to you share. So and I have to say, like, that's why I always want to share these amazing stories like yours, because it can hit someone to say, like, how am I negotiating, or am I even negotiating with myself? Am I even
Mhm.
allowing myself to have a conversation or to have any decision making in this
Yeah.
life that we've been gifted? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we're walking away, we're walking around asleep.
100%. And I'll tell you, it wasn't like renegotiated in my heart and then everything fell into place. I had a very like a very heartbreaking breakup
Mhm.
while I was in the middle of being very sick. I had, and still do, have a teenage daughter who I'm primary caregiver for and provider for, and that obligation did not go away, nor did it get easier. It's just the nature of having a family. And sorry to tell you, nobody cares if you're dying of cancer when you still have to take care of your kids. It's like
Wow.
there are things that still, life still moves on.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop for illness. But I had to pause. And so I got much better at, and I had to get more comfortable with living on a lot less financial abundance for a period of time. I didn't know where I wanted to live. I didn't know if I was going to move out of LA. I mean, literally everything was up for grabs because I was willing to give it all up and also willing to retain whatever else I needed. And I didn't make any assumptions that I knew what that would look like. I really had to follow my heart and my joy and my peace. And all of
Yeah.
those things are very important. And I think the peace is kind of like a root chakra concept. My heart, obviously, this is coming from the heart space. And my joy is kind of like in this space. So it's like when I'm following my joy, it's the things that excite me, that kind of get me buzzy in my head, that feel invigorating intellectually as well as spiritually. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like when I started doing all the work on my body, I also started getting all these a lot more sense, like my clair senses started coming through, my body sense started coming through, so that if something didn't feel right in my body, I just trusted it. I dated a couple of people since that breakup over a couple of years,
Mhm.
and I listened to my physical body is a great filtration system. And so therefore, if I don't feel 100% comfortable in my body around somebody, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just doesn't mean that I need to spend a tremendous amount of time with them. And
Wow.
I've used that, as I healed my body and I healed my trauma, the energy really started coming back into my body. And then I started being able to identify the different feelings that were in each chakra system or energy center. Because even more recently, the last 6 months, I was like, okay, well, I actually need to start getting on with life. So I can't just be, in bed and meditating all the time, which I needed to do to get to the
Yeah.
point where I was able to just function. But then I
Yeah.
was like, okay, now I need to actually have a life where I'm working and functioning in society again, but I don't have the energy for that. So I started doing all this very specific Kundalini yoga practices that would bring energy into certain body centers so that I had the energy to go and do the things I needed to do for a period of time, whether that was like 2 or 3 hours or it was like a 12-hour shift.
Right.
So I found that being able to, once I had healed, the body systems were actually intact to bring in energy and put out energy appropriately. So that's
Mhm.
actually been the bigger lesson and something that I've been piecing together sort of slowly but surely. And even when I went to Sedona and learned how to do this past life regression hypnotherapy, nursing school is no joke. It was a lot of work. And so taking time off was very intentional. And I knew at that time that I wanted to be incorporating not only holistic concepts, but spiritual concepts,
Mhm.
deeply spiritual concepts into nursing, but I had no idea what that would look like. And now it's really interesting that after all, over a decade later, it's coming together in a way that I never could have even pictured.
Yeah.
Um, And also, it allows me to kind of do medical intuit work with people in a way that I would have never conceived that this was a possibility, but it's a very functional way. It's what people do. This is what like
Yeah.
nurses and doctors actually do in a lot of ways, just by understanding their specialties very well. But if you understand the body and the spirit and how the nature of medicine, of energy medicine, how that affects the body systems, then you're
Mhm.
kind of tapping into something that is the overarching concept of health,
Right.
in my opinion.
No, I agree. It's interesting because just recently, the last couple of weeks, I've been going down a rabbit hole. I won't get too deeply into it, but talking about, following these podcasts with Casey and Callie, brother, sister, Casey and Callie Means, talking about the fact that like our body is an ecosystem, like our body is
Mhm.
one system. And also talking about that from that perspective. So it resonates with me, everything that you're saying, because when we treat it like the spirit energy system, like one system of a million systems, it makes the most sense, right? And so I wanted to also ask you too, in terms of, you mentioned Kundalini, and I know that you do somatic work, and that was something that
Mhm.
also opened the door through when you were diagnosed 2.5 years ago. So can you explain for those that maybe not super
Yeah,
versed in Kundalini or somatic,
like what I'm
share,
talking about.
or yeah, and how that is so important for us in terms of like the energy body?
Yeah. Okay. So, the somatic work that I did was basically going into a beautiful yoga studio, and just sometimes I would actually take medication before I went in there with the idea that I was going to be working toxins and emotions out of my body. And so I would, really got in touch with my breath, and really got in touch with the fact that my body wasn't actually able to physically do a lot of the things that I wanted to anymore. But if I could rely on the breath to do most of the work, then I didn't have to come up with energy in my body. The breath was the energy. This is the concept that yoga teaches, but I think that because most people going into yoga are already fit, they're already healthy, you don't have to rely on the breath. But I promise you, if you try it, there's very basic concepts of breath work that you can incorporate immediately into yoga, which gives you access. Breath is prana. We're bringing energy into the body. And as we intentionally move that breath throughout our energy body, it starts to awaken the the energy centers. It's almost like if your arm went to sleep and then you didn't know that it was attached to you, would you know to start wiggling it so that it would get awake again? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a concept that is, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about all these energy centers in the body that most likely are dormant, or they're not working, they're not functioning actively, or you're not able to use them functionally, intentionally. And so I ended up taking Kundalini yoga, having no idea what it actually was. And Kundalini is a really interesting practice. It's very spiritual in nature, but it really is about strengthening all these different energetic bodies. And I am not a Kundalini practitioner, but from the classes that I have taken and the practice that I have, because I typically do Kundalini about 20 to 30 minutes a day, whenever possible, usually about 4 or 5 times a week. I will pick certain exercises. Most of them are actually working on the ka, which is the energetic body. So we do have an aura, we do have an energy body. We're all like little batteries. And depending on what you're doing on a daily basis, that can be fairly shut down, or you can have one energy center that's really strong. And maybe the rest are shut down. I do notice that there's people who are very spiritual. I was one of these people who are very spiritual, but not that integrated into their body. Because even when I was a kid, I actually did have out of body experiences and all sorts of other things. So that was like from the time I was maybe 6 or 7, and actually probably earlier than that. I have these memories of not being in my body and seeing myself in a room, like from the corners, so that type of thing. So I've always been this person who's like my energy, my spirit, like my energy centers, the upper chakras were stronger and the lower chakras were weak. And then sometimes people who are more kinesthetic or earthy, they tend to have more integration in the lower chakras, but not the upper chakras. So the idea is really to take all of that and integrate it so that each chakra system is being exercised. And Kundalini yoga will focus on bringing prana and body movement into very specific areas of the body. So you're working with, I think, galactic energy as well as Gaia energy. So like our bodies are meant to connect these things. That is why we have all these energy centers. So we're walking on the earth and we're also having this interface through our pineal gland, our mind, and the amount to which you're connected with nature in your body is going to impact the type of interface that you have with other dimensionality and galactic information. A lot of people are very connected. They're not even aware of what necessarily I think is going on. So that's my opinion. I hear some similar ideas, but somatic work is simply going into a space and using gentle breath and mindfulness to bring intention into a certain body part. Whatever you find in there is up to you. People are like, oh, there's trauma in the hips. Sure, there's trauma in the hips. If you had an injury, if you have had a car accident, if you have shame around sexuality, like there's a lot of reasons why there is trauma in the hips. There also might be trauma in the shoulders. So there's a lot of generalities that people are using. There is certain types of trauma that centers in the hips, or there might, like I said, there might be an injury or something like that that's bringing attention to that sacral center, that sacral chakra, that mother wound. There's so many places you can go. There's not one specific what fits all thing in terms of this type of work, or even like the Kundalini work that I do, it intentionally taps into these energy centers so that if I feel misaligned somewhere, I can probably start to intuit what's going on based on what's currently going on in my emotional life with my relationships, whether it's family, work, or friends or anything like that. But usually it's tied into my emotions, my body, probably some soul contracts that I might want to renegotiate. A lot of times it's around like how difficult do I want this to be, or how easy do I want this to be? How much do I want to let this go? You know what I mean?
I want to touch on that because as you're sharing and I'm listening to you, what came to me was wellness over illness. And what I mean by that is when we're talking about ecstatic dance, moving the body, somatic, moving the body, Kundalini, activating the chakras, moving the energy. What I've noticed over the last, I'll call it several years. And again, I always say, I'm not going to generalize. However, I've seen a lot of people talking about being in their trauma and trauma and trauma. And I think, absolutely. But how about not sitting there for so long? And so imagine, as I'm hearing you say, issues with the hips, tightening of the hips or the shoulders could be sexual, trauma or whatever that is, not to discredit trauma. But imagine the power of creating a system in our life and creating a lifestyle around vitality and working towards wellness, not getting so stuck on any kind of a definition of the illness. And not to say that we don't want to define the illness and understand the illness and actually know what we're working with, but we all know that our dominant thoughts create our reality.
Yeah.
And so I love everything that you're doing. And that's one of the many reasons why I wanted to chat with you and share your gorgeousness with people, was that I saw what you were doing. Like I saw you have this definition come in, this diagnosis. Many people die from their diagnosis,
Totally.
right? And I saw you, like I witnessed you just all of a sudden say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to shine. I'm going to be on a discovery path and I'm going to shine and I'm going to teach why I'm shining. So I think it's really beautiful because we really want to be able to move through our emotions. And again, I'm not a practitioner on all these things and I'm certainly not an expert. I just feel as you're sharing that's an intuitive like aha moment for me of focus on the wellness, not the illness. And allow the movement, right? Find
100%.
your flow. Your flow could
Yeah.
be somatic. Your flow could be plant medicine. Your flow could be Kundalini. Your flow can be meditation. You could be Dr. Joe. You could be Louise Hay. You could be Dolores Cannon on, or you could be whatever that works. Find your flow. It's going to be
Mhm.
different, but flow is the way to go, really, when you think about it, right?
For sure.
Stuck emotions, and you and I've talked about that because I've been certified in medical intuition, not using it as a business practice, but because I
Mhm.
wanted to really learn in my own wellness business, why are people coming ill, feeling that I don't feel well? This is not working for me. And I thought there has to be something simply other than I can't lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
There must be something behind that. And for myself included, when I was diagnosed with celiac, I was like, okay, I realized I was not able to digest what I was doing in my life at that time. So go
Mhm.
figure.
Yeah.
So when I
Right.
started to put the two together and I realized that, illness really is, and all other things too, not from the doctor and nurse perspective, but illness really is whenever you have things that are holding real estate in your body that can't move
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
create that blockage, right? And so
Yeah.
flow is a beautiful solution. It's not going to cure. We're not here to cure through somatic, but maybe that's possible. You could
I
touch on
think it's
that.
part of the healing process.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I also something that I think is interesting in the space that we're talking about right now, that I'm seeing as kind of a trend is, people trying to get an emotion or a feeling out of their body, and that's valid. And I'm not saying not to do that. However, I also I want to suggest here for people who sometimes just getting a little more quiet, and rather than trying to get rid of this idea of getting rid of, because by the way, as soon as you get rid of the anxiety in your body, if you didn't figure out why that anxiety is occurring, it will come back. So you're not really getting rid of anything. You're just
Mhm.
it's like a temporary relief. And so a lot of these exercises will absolutely work temporarily. Of course, my opinion is the idea is that we don't want to have temporary relief from anything. We want to be working towards, sustainable solutions. I think this is
Mhm.
part of our cultural um ambiguity about, how much personal responsibility are we willing to accept so that we can be healthy, and also we can have health and alignment with the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
And that requires sustainability and peace,
Yeah.
and all of those things also require a tremendous amount of acceptance. And so I do think that there's something to be said for, there are somatic exercises or body exercises that you can absolutely do to get rid of a feeling, but a lot of times the work that I like to focus on has a lot more, like there's more integration of this undesirable feeling into the body. And then you realize, okay, this is actually part of me. This is what people are
Mm.
referring to with shadow work. Shadow work isn't like re-exploring your hoe phase or anything like this. You know what I mean? Because people talk about this like, let me see my shadow. It's like, no, you're kind of
I don't want to go
immature.
back to that phase.
No, thank you. It doesn't work for me anyway. No, not anymore. So the shadow work is accepting these parts of ourselves that were either parental figures that we resented how they approached us or the way they affected us, but the ways that we do the same things to ourselves or the people around us that we love.
Yeah.
And it's an acknowledgement that everything in its rightful place has function and meaning and is necessary. So
Mm.
it's kind of a very interesting balance. And agreed, I don't work a lot with plant medicine personally anymore, but I did a lot when I was healing, and it
Yeah.
was very helpful. It's usually, to me, something that is helpful in with usually some guidance is great, because you can kind of get lost out in the you can get lost in the psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
You can get very ungrounded. So it
Mhm.
is nice to have somebody kind of tethering you to reality at times is a great choice. Um, but it's also okay to be a little bit in the abstract when you are recreating your life. So, like, there's a place for everything. It's just a matter of how long you stay there. And
Yeah.
yes, trauma has its function. I think it loses its function when we try to analyze it. When we
Mm,
try to analyze it and figure out why something happened or why someone's doing something or why someone's a narcissist, it's like we've lost the utility of the trauma. The trauma is there to create pivotal moments of life decision to veer us in one direction or another. I don't believe we're meant to sit in trauma and try and figure out why. I think
yeah.
it's meant to be a catalyst to one direction or another.
Yeah. I love that because again, we've all had in different extremes as well, right? I think about
Absolutely.
your story and
Yeah.
all of us have had trauma and we're still here. So trauma's probably on its way again, right? I would say
Right.
we're not done yet unless we're
Wait for
done.
it.
Wait for it. Don't go look too closely and look, too deeply for it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really important to know that we're all together in this. Like we're not alone. And I think finding
Yeah.
your tribe, like you and I chatted about a couple months ago, this journey of learning how to be more in relationship to ourselves can be challenging whenever maybe our environment outside of that is not supportive. So, did you
Mm,
find, Constance, whenever you were actually on this path, did you find that things outside of you changed in terms of your influence, your support system, your friendships? Um,
100%.
yeah. And how did that look like? What did that look like for you and how did you navigate that?
It was interesting for me. I have had the health issue of it's I'm a very social person, but now
Mhm.
it's draining for me to be around people, and my immune system is health it's doing great, but I can't overtax it, and sometimes that just means that I need a lot of alone time to re-energize or focus on myself or my home or my family.
Yeah.
And so the social aspect of my life has gotten much smaller, and I've had to look at that as a gift, of being able to focus on myself. But I am intentionally building relationships now. um, it's been different, building community when I'm looking to build community based on common spiritual beliefs and emotional beliefs.
Yeah.
Is it takes a little more time.
Yeah.
It
And because
does.
you're now in this more, I would say, like just more awareness of your energy around you
Yeah.
and being more sensitive to that, right? So,
100%.
that it is you're vetting people. Like you had said just a while back about dating, you're like, there's nothing wrong with those people, but I don't need to spend a tremendous amount of time with them. I loved when you said that because it's just like we owe it to ourselves to decide where the energy is coming at so that we can manage our own well-being and still be there for other people because it's a
Mhm.
two-way street, right? We're not just looking for friends to support us and to fill our cup. It's how are we making sure that there's a symbiotic relationship of, that back and forth and give and take, and synergy is really important because
Yeah,
we only
and
have so much time in the day. We only have so much energy. We only have so much
it
bandwidth, if you will, that it's really important for us to not be overdoing it and overexerting our energy for something that's not maybe serving at our highest good.
right, absolutely. And I do think also people in like metaphysical or spiritual space, we tend to counsel our friends and do free work for them, and that's okay. It's just what's the limit to that? And if you have a friend who it's like it's all give and there's not a lot of
Mhm.
take, then sometimes you have to look at those relationships for
Absolutely. And
sure.
be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to look at now that I'm approaching my life in a different way and I feel a very specific purpose. Is it okay to have a smaller social life? Is it okay to have complete? I mean, I will tell you, and you were talking about ascension, and I do believe that there's more people having these experiences than before, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I do see that we're getting a lot more energetically thrown at us, in my opinion. The electromagnetic resonance of the earth is changing, like the solar flaring. There's a lot of energetic shifts that are happening. And
Mhm.
I am a big believer that that does affect the physical body, which of course in turn affects the psyche. Which I think if when I'm talking about the psyche, I think it ties into mental and spiritual health together. And that impacts physical health over time, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly. But I do believe that I'm not the only person that I've taught. There's so many other people that I've talked to that have had major life shifts around the same time frame, like in the last 2 to 4 years. People are having massive changes in lifestyle for a variety of reasons, whether they're financial or health changes or relationship changes that are big. I talk to a lot of people like this, and I do think that we're all coming to a point where the quality and depth of our relationships is a lot more important than the quantity.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good thing.
I love it. I do. And I also think too, I'll touch on even like as a side note with human design. If anyone's interested into human design, I had Jenny Lethbridge, my coach from Australia. She is a wise counsel talking about human design as one component. And I think when we realize that many of us, even more now, there's this point where it's like I'm a role model hermit. So, and I talk about this all the time, but like I'm a role model, but then I need to hermit. And I realized I never understood why I needed it, because I was never gifting myself the hermit version. I was never gifting myself that time where I actually have to recalibrate. I take on so much energy, as so many people do. It's not just me, but I want to say to people, like, if you feel this need to just shut yourself into a room or like be in your backyard and turn your phone off, no matter what your business is, that is on purpose. And so because we are doing there's such a different energy happening in this frequency that's happening over the last 2 to 4 years for sure. And we need to be able to allow ourselves that resting period, even if it doesn't make sense, even if we don't think we can take 10-15 minutes, just go and stand on the grass. You don't have to do a 1 hour meditation. You don't have to go onto the mountaintop and do a hike, just whatever that little thing is that you can do to make sure that you can reframe your energy and then give yourself back what you don't realize is being, you're spreading yourself thin. You don't see it. It's invisible.
Yeah.
But you could feel it. And then being able to honor that consistently, because you had said too earlier, it's about sustainable change, right? It's not about once in a while change. That's not going to get us once in a while result. It's going to get us once in a while results. We know that in anything that we give our energy to.
Right.
So it's amazing.
I mean, I think that also speaks to your discussion about flow. I mean, we could get into a whole, this is how I do X, Y, Z. This is the other reason why I'm very interested in, rather than coming up with I see a lot of coursework out there, and like, it's so great. And my personal trajectory with that is really to allow people to start to discover their own path. And I think in doing that, I don't prescribe to them what it is that they're going to get. I don't know what your experience is going to be as you have an unfolding, but I know that I can give you some tools that will allow you to have an unfolding, and what you do with it is up to you. So a lot of times when we have this quiet time, depending on the energy of the day, where you're living, and what your personal circumstances are, you will have information that comes through if you allow the space to be like, why am I feeling anxious in my chest? Why am I feeling ungrounded? Why am I feeling like I'm spinning? Sometimes you just need more sleep, but sometimes there's a message there. There's a variety of things. I think the thing is, like, listening to our bodies is not something that we were taught, and it's something that we have to reparent ourselves to do and model it for our friends and our family, and the younger people around us probably are better at doing it. I think the more we allow each other to do it, the more it will be an invitation for society to start allowing these windows of grace. I was laughing because I do work in mental health, and we have patients come in, and then I've got all the people I work with too. And I said, we should be able to take a week just we work with the patients for a week and then we go into treatment for a week,
Absolutely.
which
But
I
why?
think would be amazing. But of course, it doesn't exist.
No.
But
Yeah. You could
because
always
yet,
pioneer anything. Knowing you is gonna it'll be rolled out in January.
100%. But it's like if I give you 50% of my energy, then I'll give myself 50% of my energy. And I really feel like that, I hope, is where we're moving towards. It allows us to do very meaningful work with other people, but then it also allows us the time to recuperate because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, working 60 hours a week with no return, like it's going to end in some serious burnout. And I do see people in medical field doing this type of work. And I think, and I'm hoping that things will start to get more manageable and people will at least have more time to have some flexibility in their schedules and routines, because we can only help people so much until the body needs replenishment. And it's not
Mhm.
just the body, the spirit also needs replenishment. So that is connection to nature, that is quiet time, that's time with our animals, that's time with our loved ones, that's time with ourselves, that's nurturing time with our body. Like there's ways to be with yourself and be kind to yourself, or you can kind
Mhm.
of be a jerk to yourself and
Yeah.
eat
It's a
junk
choice.
food and
Yeah.
like not get enough sleep and watch too much TV. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that to their child. So I probably wouldn't tell you to do that for yourself either. But
Yeah.
what you do with your personal time is your own. But there's ways to be very nurturing and intentional that can feed you rather
Mhm.
than give you, you know, emotional junk food,
Mhm.
so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It's emotional junk food. And we're so
Which
and
is
I wanna
okay
talk about
sometimes. It's okay. I do
yes, of
watch
course.
reality television sometimes, and
And I love it, and I do too. Once in a while, I'm like, I'm gonna do this is an Emily in Paris evening.
great. I love it. It's so
Because we need
cringy.
to have that as long as we're not doing it like, that's not, for the
Yeah,
most
that's
part.
not
It's
my
just
own that's not my
no,
only self-care.
no.
That's not my self-care.
Yeah,
It's an aspect of it because sometimes I do need to let my mind just be silly
yeah.
and not care and not be in mindful space.
And it actually feels like coming out of a yoga class sometimes. It truly is that same feeling if it's like a half an hour of, reality TV or like watching
Totally.
again, I'm gonna go back to Emily in Paris because I think it's adorable.
I love
But
it.
when I do that, I'm like, wow, I feel good now that I just did that, that I actually turned my brain off for a minute
Mhm.
and really just enjoyed just the bliss of, of that.
Entertainment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing I also want to share too, and I'll share more about what I have going on at the end of this podcast,
Please.
that I would love to invite you and many people to, is that we're so and we know we're so overstimulated by our phones, let's be honest.
Yeah,
And it's actually quite scary, right? It's the new addiction. It's like alcoholism and drug, again,
totally.
we're so addicted to our phone, we don't realize, and sometimes it's kind of scary. And so there's such a magic of slowing down so we can actually see the messages and being able to have that opportunity to everything works and everything doesn't work, right? So there's a gift to social media. I mean, my dogs, I found them because of Facebook. Like I rescued my dogs from Kentucky because
For
of
sure.
2 Facebook posts. Love it. There's something to be said for like there's value everywhere. And there was also like it steals our time in places as well too, where it could be toxic. And
Mhm.
so, being so overstimulated, we need that time to be off of our phone, to not have all the dings on our phone. I mean, how many threads, when I'm talking to someone, I said, "Hey, I just sent you a picture." Oh, where? From WhatsApp, Instagram, or Facebook, or iMessage, or email. And I'm like, or Telegram, or Signal. That's like 6 or 7. I'm like, "Oh my goodness gracious." Imagine all day long, you'd have to spend your whole day circulating every single thread to make sure that you're always on top of it. And so I think it's just being able to get old school, stick your toes in the sand or in the grass or go for a walk with your dogs without your phone unless it's early or evening. You need your phone to be safe. But I think it's just a beautiful feeling when you don't have something tethered to you that's distracting you or like that's going to pull your energy really quickly.
Yeah.
So minding your time, creating a schedule, creating a system where, you do your morning rituals and then you're available. Now you're available to like give, but like giving to yourself first. And that's something that I'm, always still learning and the intention is there. And then sometimes it doesn't work out. But I realized even this morning, I traveled to Canada for 3 weeks and then I came back and I had my own integration, like not feeling well. And then I
Mm.
went back to yoga this morning for the first time since the end of September.
Okay.
And I went to my yoga class and I couldn't believe how fabulous I felt from 1 hour. And I thought, there is no negotiating this during the week. My Monday, my Wednesday, my Friday, I deserve to, and I must create a schedule where that is my appointment with myself.
Mhm.
Right. And it could be yoga for people. It could be their walk for people. It could be meditation. It could be
Completely.
journaling, and so I think it's really important. Insert personal practice here that's going to help us to feel that connectedness with ourselves.
Mhm.
So, Constance, I know you have a lot of beautiful things, and you're also writing. Can you tell me, are you any updates on your book?
You know what? I'm not. I've had to kind of put it on a little bit on the back burner because I've had all these other the the medical concierge work that's been it's been getting a little bit busier, which I'm very
Successful.
excited about. But
Yeah.
I have about I've got about the first third of a book written.
Wow.
Um, and we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see. I'm excited to do it. I think probably I'll be able to put more time in earnest next year.
I love it.
Probably like second and third quarters of next year.
Mhm. And so, for those of us in our community watching you and my friends in my community that are hearing your story, where can we find you, or what is it that you have going on? Can people work with you directly? Do you have anything that's available for those that want to tap in, get to know you better, learn more about what the resources are to connect with you? What does that look like for us?
Yeah. So I am adding services to the concierge
Mhm.
that will be more medical intuit and Reiki type of infused nursing visit for people who are interested in that. So they can connect with me on my Instagram is probably the best way,
Right.
which is Align Concierge LA. Um, and there's more information about what the concierge does
Yeah,
and all the other fun stuff. So
I
that's
love it.
probably the best way.
The best.
I do have a podcast that I've been wanting to develop, but again, I've been so busy, which will have, and I do have a YouTube channel for that, but it's not really got much content. So I'm not going to blast that out yet. But I have started working with people on kind of a metaphysical medical end,
Mhm.
as well as working with them, from a nursing standpoint. So that those sessions are available through. There's a link tree that's on
Okay,
my Instagram, and they can connect that way, or
that's
they can also
wonderful.
just private message me and discuss what it is
Yeah,
that they're
yeah.
interested in talking
And
about.
your email is on the link tree in your Instagram as well.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah.
And so I always like to ask a question at the end, and it's always just a question that's never the same question. But I wanted to go back because I was so blessed to meet your daughter when she came to Mexico. You came to Mazatlan for a very short visit,
Hmm.
which was such a pleasure. It was so lovely to be able to hug you in person after
The
knowing you for
best.
years. It was so much fun. And you're coming back. So I'm just waiting for you to be like, I'm coming
A
back.
100%.
Just waiting. So I had an opportunity to meet your beautiful daughter, and she is such a young adult. She is such a just guiding light as well too. So I would love to ask you, what would you tell her? And I know you've had many conversations with her through this beautiful journey that you've been on, but what would you tell her, as a young adult in this world? She's living a very different world than we did when we were her age. And how old is she again? She's
Should be 19 in
19,
February. Yeah.
18, yeah. So 19 in February.
Yeah.
So what type of what advice or what wisdom do you feel she needs the most right now that can also then trickle into anyone here that may have a young adult in their life that is going through this timeline in this
Yeah.
way now, which is again
Yeah.
so different than us Gen Xers,
It's very
right?
challenging, right? It's very
Oh,
challenging.
yeah.
I do talk to her about this, and I try not to be too instructive because there's so
Mhm.
much that I can learn from her. But she does have anxiety. She has a hard time with anxiety for very obvious reasons. Growing up in the pandemic and with all the other, violence that happens in schools and stuff, it's a really weird environment to grow up in. Um, I I think one thing that I've gotten really in touch with over the last year and a half is to allow her to say how she feels without me interjecting or projecting or having any indication of what I expect her emotions to be, and just listen without judgment about how that reflects on my parenting or anything like that, and just be available to listen, to be understanding, to understand that her experience is not my experience. I don't have to personalize it. I'm holding space for her. So we take all these concepts that we do for our friends and people, maybe that if we work in healing arts or anything like that, we do all these things for our clients and our loved ones. I think sometimes it's really hard to do for our kids because we feel that it reflects on us. I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. It took me a little while to not react to her being upset about something and personalize it. Even if it is about me, it's not personal. So I need to allow myself to process my emotions about it potentially later, and hold space for her and listen to her and acknowledge that even if it's not something I understand or I identify with, maybe feel into that emotion or that sentiment or that feeling about an institution or a person, place, or thing, and allow her the grace to have absolute autonomy in her feelings.
Wow. While you're saying that, I'm thinking that's what we all want. So why would we not give that to others, whether it is our colleague, our husband, our sister, our brother, our mom, our dad, our children? And so it's interesting and it's amazing that you said that, because I'm picturing that. I'm not a parent, but I'm picturing that. It's like, as a parent, you feel like you just like there's this sense of the adult versus the child. But when you look at it in the way that you just shared, is that we have so much to learn from these light beings that have come here, and they are experiencing things that we have never experienced in the way that they are. It's mind-blowing to me. Right. And so to be able to say, and tell me how that must feel for you, because I would actually have no idea.
Correct.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Wow.
we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. It's amazing. I love you. I think you're so amazing.
I love you back.
I just think you're so special. You're fabulous. I would love to have you on again, see how things are going in a little while from now. Right. I'm excited for people to be able to get together, to learn more about you in whatever facet that is as you continue on this discovery path. I feel like it's only just begun, and I'm learning so much from you in this conversation, in our past private conversations. And so to my amazing community, if you do want to get in touch with Constance Armstrong, I will have all of the information in the show notes. So take a look at her Instagram, follow her. She's amazing. She does a really cool reels inspiring us every day. I just think it's beautiful. Every day, or when she feels like being on social, like me, I'm like, it's not going to be an everyday thing. It's when I feel like it. You'll hear from me, you'll see me, and sometimes you won't. And also I wanted to share with my community as well too, as we close out 2024, I have created a beautiful journey that I am gifting to share with others. This journey is called Follow the Magic That Ignites Your Inner Essence. It's a guidebook on my website on lucysmiles.com. You can subscribe to follow my intuitive messages every week on my email. And also, if you want to join my free mastermind, I'm starting in January. And this mastermind for me is something that I got channeled when I was thinking about how do I want to show up for my community as we're growing. I wanted to teach people how I started being a writer as Lucy Smiles, and what did I do and how did that look? And so my intuitive channeling came through for me to create this guidebook called Follow the Magic That Ignites Your Inner Essence. And I'm teaching people how to look for the signs, how to be able to tap into our hearts. What do those signs mean? And how can that manifest into our lives in ways that we cannot even imagine? And so our mastermind starts in January. All of the information is on email. So you could sign up for that on lucysmiles.com. Again, it will be a group mastermind online. So wherever in the world you are, we will be able to have you join us. And Constance, maybe I can have you join us as well too. You'd be such an asset. And so I'm so grateful. Thank you for being on our show. Thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing your vulnerable heart and your story. I just know so many people that can hear your story and then maybe feel inside of them, they're not alone. I think it's really important. It doesn't mean that you have to have Constance's story or
Mhm.
my story, but knowing that we all have a story and there's ways that we can connect based on that and also not sit in it but grow because of it. So until next time, my gift for you is to join the mastermind. My wish for you is no matter what, to follow the magic that ignites your inner essence. And until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, friends, thank you again for following and tuning in to the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. It really does truly support my mission to help inspire you through our beautiful guests that I also want to thank who have come on to share their beautiful stories of transformation. If you want to connect with me privately, you can actually go right to my website, lucysmiles.com. Feel free to send to me a personal email. You can also catch my newsletter by subscribing, which also includes my weekly intuitive messages. If you're on social media, you can follow me with my handle, I am Lucy Smiles. And if this was inspiring to you and something helped support you on whatever the journey is that you are going through, please feel free to review, write a comment, and most importantly, if you can subscribe and share this episode and all our other episodes, that would be amazing. My dream and my mission is to truly help you to follow the magic that ignites your inner essence. And so until next time, we will catch you soon. I hope to catch you on the next episode.